There are many names for it if you ask climate change criers. Yesterday it was global warming, today it's climate change. For sane people, it's just called the weather. Environmentalists would have you believe the El Nino storms we experienced here on the West Coast was a direct result of climate change, even though they happen most, if not every year. Joining me now to discuss is Climate Depot's Marc Morano. Marc, how you doing?
Very good, Liz. Happy to be here.
First of all, these El Nino storms in California, they're no joke. The flooding is pretty terrible. But in your opinion, are these storms a result of climate change?
No, not at all. I mean, this is a natural cycle, the El Nino. We were told California was in a permanent drought, and now you're getting plenty of rain. They go in cycles. And even the drought, as bad as it's been in California, if you go back even previous centuries, they're nowhere near where California was in previous centuries. California has been remarkably reduced drought in recent years. Even with this bad drought, it doesn't compare to the past one. So natural cycles rule the climate. And you had Leonardo, I guess it was Leonardo DiCaprio talking there. The idea that we tie every weather event anywhere on the globe to global warming. We had an Associated Press writer, Seth Borenstein, talking about Washington, D.C. not getting a trace of snowfall, as though it had some kind of climate implication on a planet that's billions of years old. We're going to sit here and act like this is meaningful record of any kind. Meanwhile, you got to look, first of all, globally at the whole planet. And globally, we're actually still, according to satellites, going on almost 19 years without any global warming. So if you want to cherry pick data, you can look at that. It's just nonsense.
Right. If you want to pick and choose, you can certainly pick what you want to choose. I think, yeah, just from my personal experience here, it seems like government mismanagement in California. We just got rain upon rain upon rain, and nothing was done to use that rain to help the so-called drought, which was detrimental, apparently, to the state. But the mainstream media and a lot of progressives like to say, and this is going back to what Leonardo DiCaprio said in the clip, they like to say that a huge majority of scientists agree about climate change. DiCaprio just said 99% of scientists. But I don't think that's accurate. I mean, there are many credible scientists who don't draw the same conclusions. I don't want to put you on a numerical spot here, but what do you think the percentage of scientists who believe in climate change versus those who are skeptical would look like?
Well, you know, first of all, it's all definitions and terms. The 90, he upped it to 99. The claims are 97. You'll hear President Obama say it. There've been a few studies that claim 97. These studies that claim 97% of scientists agree, first of all, one of the key studies didn't even have 97 scientists. It was only based on 77 scientists. Second of all, many skeptical scientists said they would agree with the contention of the 97. In other words, has the Earth warmed, has humans contributed? So it's a meaningless stat and figure. However, when you look at things like the American Meteorological Society, there was one survey that showed up to 75% of their members were skeptical, with many believing global warming, and they used the word hoax. So, and yet the governing board of these science institutions come out and endorse global warming. We've had geological meetings in Europe that are huge. They're called the Olympics of geological events, where they've said up to 75% of scientists, 2/3 were skeptical of the United Nations claims on climate. It's very hard to actually come up with a number, but what we're finding, and recent surveys are showing, it's probably less than 50% that have any meaningful claim when you talk about what global warming means, what does climate change mean. And I think that's where people get confused. There's hundreds of factors that influence the climate. To say, is climate change real or not, or is it happening, is a meaningless expression. It's certainly when you put that in a survey. So when you ask the right questions, do you believe the United Nations claims that the majority of warming since 1950 has been from human? That's where you get really interesting answers, and that's where you get much less than 50%.
That's where you get actual information instead of agenda-driven studies, just so that people can use them for talking points and sound bites like Leo DiCaprio did. We'll have to send him this clip afterward so that he can recognize what he did.
Yes.
He also said in that clip that he doesn't believe, he said that anyone who doesn't believe in climate change doesn't believe in science.
Yes.
Now, if you were talking directly to him, how would you respond to that?
Well, it's the most preposterous thing to ever say. It's an intimidation tactic. They're basically saying you're anti-science. You have no role in this debate. What we are talking about here are Nobel Prize-winning scientists. We're talking about left-wing, politically left-wing scientists, former French Socialist Party members, scientists who voted for Al Gore, scientists who endorsed President Obama, coming out now and re-examining the evidence. The evidence is now overwhelming that mankind is not driving a climate catastrophe. You can argue of mankind's influence, and the scientists that we feature in the film and the many scientists that are now speaking out argue that mankind's influence isn't even distinguishable from natural variability. That's not anti-science. That's looking at the data, the hard data. Big tornadoes are actually on no trend or a decline. Hurricanes are actually on shocking lack of hurricanes in decline. Droughts and floods, as much as you hear about them, are either on no trend or declining trends on 50 to 100-year timescales globally and in the United States. So the idea that the data is not there, it's anti-science to make claims that there is no debate and that the consensus is there and that 99% of scientists agree and that we need to act. That's anti-science.
Right. No, there is change in our climate, but my understanding of this issue, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that these are natural fluctuations. So something that I don't think people talk about quite enough, and I wish we would have the discussion, is what are some of the benefits of these changes, of the warmer temperatures?
Well, let's assume they're right for a moment. If you remember, the medieval warm period from about 900 AD to 1300 AD was called the medieval climate optimum. Now, why did they use the word optimum? Because we know life thrives when it's warm. And if you look at our own planet today, if you look at the poles, the North and South Pole has the least life, the least biodiversity, the least plant and animal species, the least humans. As you get to the equator, the hottest part of the globe, you're going to get the most biodiversity, the most plant and animal species. And that's what's missing from this debate is life craves warmth. Now, obviously, they claim this is going to be too much warmth. Well, if you look on it from any time scale, there's nothing unprecedented going on. The medieval warm period was as warm or warmer. Sea levels aren't showing the acceleration they predicted. Global temperatures aren't. They'll claim it's the hottest year, Liz, but these are based on hundreds of a degree difference between so-called hottest years, and it's based on land-based thermometers, not the satellites, which were actually set up to get more accurate global temperature readings. So on every metric, warmth is generally more favorable to life. In fact, even on the war national security claim, in warm periods we have more peace. In colder periods we've had more conflict, wars, and violence. They have it exactly backwards. The hard data shows it. Peer-reviewed studies show that.
Right, and yet liberal scientists don't bring this up, which shows to me that they have an agenda. Marc, we are out of time for today. I appreciate, as always, you coming on the program and everything that you have to say.